Hi, everybody. This is Dan Freeman from ALA TechSource, and we are happy to have you here today for our episode of American Libraries Live, the kid and teen-friendly library. We've got a great panel today. Before we start, I just want to give a special thanks, as usual, to the staff at Northwestern University Library, providing the space and equipment we're using today to run the broadcast, particularly the IT staff, which does such a great job. I want to get right to it today, so let's introduce our panel, starting with our moderator, Jennifer Velasquez. Jennifer, welcome.
Hi, Dan.
Hi, and Jennifer is a lecturer in the Graduate School of Library Information Science at San Jose State. She is also the head of Teen Services at the San Antonio Public Library. She's an author, a speaker. In 2005, she was awarded the New York Times Librarian Award in recognition of her work in teen library services. So welcome. I also want to welcome Lana Adlewin. Lana, welcome.
Hello.
Hi, did I pronounce your name correctly?
It's Adlewin.
Adlewin, I'm sorry. Oh, it was so close. Okay. Well, Lana is currently the supervising librarian for teen services at the Oakland Public Library. She received her master's in library and information science from the Pratt Institute in New York, and she's previously worked for the Brooklyn Public Library and the Sacramento Public Library as a youth services librarian. I want to welcome Amy Alessio. Amy, welcome. And Amy is the teen coordinator at the Schaumburg Public Library here in the Chicago area. Amy writes and edits fiction and nonfiction, including the previous title she co-authored with Kim Patton that was published by ALA Editions, A Year of Programs for Teens. And I also want to welcome Heather Booth. Welcome, Heather.
Hello. Hi. And
Heather is committed to serving the dynamic needs and interests of young people in a community setting. You can tell I took that from her bio from her book. Heather's been a teen services librarian here in the Chicago area since 2002. She's currently at the Thomas Ford Memorial Library in Western Springs, and she's the author with Karen Jensen of the recently published Whole Library Handbook, Teen Services, so check that out at the ALA store. And I also want to welcome, and on her screen as well, very cool. And I also want to welcome Amanda Folk. Welcome, Amanda.
Hello. Thanks, Steve.
And Amanda is the Youth Services Librarian at the Sacramento Public Library. She's an enthusiastic advocate for creating welcoming and accessible spaces for children and families. And just for our audience, we are going to be doing our best to devote equal time and sort of blended time to youth services and teen services. But Amanda is our only youth services librarian who is here today. So she's going to sort of carry a heavy load there, but we're gonna make sure this is a friendly conversation for everybody. So with that, no pressure. I'll turn things over to Jennifer.
Hey everybody, welcome. So pleased to be tackling this topic today about how to make spaces and libraries friendly and welcoming for both kids and teens. And I just want to throw out there, one of the things that we were talking about sort of as a group previously was, what's the biggest challenge you face in making your library a friendly place for children and teens? And if we could start with Lana with that, please.
Sure. I always think a lot about this, and I kind of want to take it on a macro level of where we are with libraries today and how we've changed so much in the years. And when looking at a library, like, where do we want to head now? I think School Library Journal had this great poster at ALA Annual about how do you library, and I think that's a big question for libraries across the country now, looking at how do we format our budgets to allow enough of our resources to go to helping and promoting and programs for children and teens. How do we budget space in our buildings to promote those areas for children and teens as well? And when patrons walk into a library, what do they see when they walk in? What is the message that we're sending, that we value children and teens in these spaces, we welcome them? What kind of programs do we offer? Are we headed in the makerspace movement? Are our libraries louder than they ever used to be in supporting children and teens? So those are the things that I really think about in terms of any of my teen spaces. When a teen walks into the building, how do they feel? What do they see? And what can they expect from us?
Thank you, Lana. That's wonderful. And if you wouldn't mind, Heather, can you follow up with that, please?
Sure. I think one of the biggest challenges that I face is an issue of time.
Right now I'm a part-time teen librarian, and I'm the only person in my library whose sole job is serving teens. And so there's a staff training bit that goes into that, trying to make sure that when I'm not in the building, there is somebody there who is comfortable and happy answering questions and interacting with teenagers. I would agree with everything that Lana said as well. Space and programs and being forward-thinking as well. So.
And Heather, I know that you're not alone in being one of the many people that is tasked with serving this large dynamic population in a part-time capacity. So I'm sure your insights today will be very valuable for us. And Amy, if you wouldn't mind.
I want to agree with a lot of things the ladies have said. I'm also part-time, but we are lucky to have more teen staff at our facility. But the key word, I think, in making the library welcoming for children and teens is flexibility. Are we able to have a facility that's flexible for technologies and flexible for diminishing staff and resources and still able to keep up? Are we flexible even outside the building? Is our outreach and our social media keeping up and letting them know that the library is a community center and it's welcoming for them to come back and to stay for long periods of time?
Really good points, really good points. Amanda?
I have to agree with what Amy said, that one of the biggest challenges we face is striking that balance with the resources that we have between being welcoming outside, being able to go out and find them where they're at, whether that's online, whether it's in their schools, whether it's just down the street at the farmer's market, or also being present in the branch then when they get here to say, welcome, this is your space, you belong here, you're welcome here. Like Lana said, I think it's really important that we take a hard look at our spaces so that when families come in and when teens come in, they feel drawn to their spaces. They can see from the moment they step in the door that this is a place for them. This is not a place where they're unwelcome. This is not a place where they're going to be shushed. This is a place where they are invited to be just the way they are. And I think that's a struggle, a challenge that we face, but I think we're up to it.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for your response to that. And I think each of you, practically each of you, touched on the matter of space. And I think that what Amanda is saying is really interesting about sort of providing those visual cues to users, not only about what space is designated for them in the library, but also making sure that that space sends a particular signal to the intended audience. And so would one of you like to talk about how do you make the physical space in the library friendly and welcoming for its intended audience?
I would.
Anyone? All right.
You do it intentionally. You look at the way your families are already using your space. I can speak to it more from a kid's perspective than a teen perspective, so I hope someone will jump in after me. But I did a remodel a year ago of a kid's library space, and we looked at the ways our families needed the space to work. Not the way we thought they needed it to work, but the way they were actually interacting with the space, the questions they were really asking us. And then we went from there and designed a space that when they walked in, they immediately visually could see, this is where I belong. This is where the 0 to 5 materials are going to be, because I've got primary colors on the wall, I've got toys on the floor, I've got a rug that shows that this is a safe space for a crawler to be on. And that drew our families to the place that's appropriate for them, rather than leaving them facing banks of gray shelving, not certain, where are the books for preschoolers? They walk in and they just know. They can just tell that this is their space. This is where families belong. It's where they're welcome before they ever see a sign. So just being really thoughtful and looking at the needs of the community, I think is so important. Not what you think they should need, but what they're actually coming and looking for.
I think that's so important to sort of break out of that box of what we think is appropriate versus, the way we're really witnessing our users using the space. And Lana, if you wouldn't mind, I'm a great fan of the teen space at Oakland Public Library. And it's remarkable. I think that it just reads teen so obviously and in that sort of intentional way that leaves very little doubt about who the intended audience is. Would you mind addressing the topic?
Sure. I think from the moment that you walk into our teen room here at the main library in Oakland, you can tell as you're walking down the hallway into our room, on the left-hand side there's a huge graffiti mural that was created by youth in our community that's been posted for the last 9 months. and that came to us through a community festival. On our front door, there are signs that are made by teens, teen volunteers, so welcoming, establishing our sort of rules of conduct and guidelines. You walk into the space, there's music playing. There's teen art all over the walls. Practically every portion of the space has a piece of teen art on it, or a sign promoting collections like graphic novels, superheroes, sci-fi, fantasy, manga. Our space is a traditional, our building's from the 50s, but it's a traditional square room, but because of the really thoughtful design, and our designs always have teen input in them, there are little nooks carved out. So there's 2 study rooms that teens can reserve, and private nooks where they can play video games, do board games. I mean, we took a square room and made it possible for, I would say, up to 10 groups to be engaged in different activities in the space. We allow, talking. We allow snacks. We serve lunches during the summer to our teens. So that's one way when walking the space. It's also always full of teens. Sometimes we can have probably up to 70 teens in the space. So teens walk in, they know that they're welcome, they have access to computers, they have friendly staff members that greet them, know their names, know about them. We have 30 teen volunteers that also work for us weekly and also run programs. So those are just some of the ways that when a teen is walking into our teen zone, they say, this is a space for me.
You know, I think that combination of what you're talking about, the space itself, the cues that the space gives off, and also the importance of the way staff attitude is as teens come in. You talked about, how you were fortunate enough to do this remodel, and I know not everyone is fortunate enough to be in that situation, but I'm wondering if anyone else on the panel would consider talking about ways that you can make a space sort of teen-friendly or kid-friendly without a remodeling budget.
I have something to add regarding that. I work in a fairly small library. I guess you'd call it a small to mid-sized library. And a few years ago, we did a reorganization. We didn't remodel, but when we realized that the carpet had to be replaced, it was an opportunity for collections to shift and move and things like that. And something that I think was really, it really made a good statement. It was at the time that the use of our reference collection was declining. So what my library did is we actually allocated the space where the reference collection had been housed as a teen space. And so this was kind of a prominent place in the library, that, the reference collection used to be the pride and joy of everyone's library. And by putting the teens there, there were beautiful windows, there was ample space. We moved the bookshelves to create a little alcove. Even though we didn't add any more space, we were dedicating a pretty prime bit of real estate in the library to teens. So, of course, that still takes time and money in terms of moving things, but we didn't add any walls, we didn't have to add any electrical wiring or anything like that, and so that was the way we were able to address it within the boundaries of our fairly small space.
Wonderful, wonderful. And, sort of the notion of reallocation of space based on the way things are changing for us, I think, rather than keeping things the way they've always been, but really looking at the needs of what's going on in our communities, who's using our libraries, and really responding to populations in that way, I think is really wonderful and forward-thinking. To return to the idea of staff greeting teens and learning their names as they come in to the building, we talked a little bit previously in our conversations before our meeting today about the notion of how everyone on staff really is responsible for serving teens. If you're working at a public service desk, everyone who walks up to that service desk is a patron, and we should be able to provide wonderful service to all of them. But can you tell me, what steps do you take? And if I don't know if this would be training or modeling good behavior, but how do you assure that staff members, including those who aren't specifically responsible for children or teens, how do you assure that children and teens are effectively served by them at your organization?
Jennifer, I'd like to jump in with that one. A couple different things I've done in the past when we've had big teen programs that I know are going to be disruptive throughout the library. One thing I have done is hand out chocolate at the various desks where the staff are going to be dealing with an influx of teens. We all like to be thanked for service, and you get the feeling that we're all in this together then. If you know that like a big scavenger hunt is coming up and every desk is going to be effective, thanks so much for helping the teens. Thanks for doing such a good job working with them on this. And a lot of times just giving them a heads up before some major things come along. I mean, we're used to letting all the reference department know about homework assignments we know about. How about letting everyone know? Because, you know, the shy teen is going to be asking the shelver where the particular materials are. Does everyone know where the extra copies of the summer reading materials are? That kind of thing goes a long way. And one thing also along with this point to go, we have signs at the front of our teen area that say ages 12 to 19 only. Everyone on staff knows that adults have their own spot. The teen spot is important enough to keep the loose adults out of there also.
That's wonderful, Amy. And I think that, you know, I'm not above bribery, you know, myself when it comes to these things. But I think, you know, thanking and really creating that notion of team. You know, you are serving this population as a team is really an important notion. And you know, go ahead.
One thing I want to add in terms of we're serving this population as a team, like stressing within your library system, and that's either from administrative support or your own voice, that we are consistent in policy enforcement. Mm-hmm. We are consistent in either our customer service policies or, you know, our handling difficult patron policies, that it goes for all age groups, being consistent in how we handle these things, being welcoming to all age groups. I think that's one way in stressing that message to all levels of staff, that there are expectations for every group we serve in the library, and hopefully they're very high.
I feel very lucky at Sacramento Public Library. We have a document that outlines the staff expectations from shelver all the way to branch supervisor of how they're going to serve all youth services populations. And it's expectations about familiarity with the collection to the same great customer service that we would give anyone. We're expected to give to our children, our families, and our teens as well.
I wonder how many questions we're going to get about where we'll be able to get a copy of that document. I'm just saying, Amanda, I'm just predicting that.
I think we'd be happy to share.
Wonderful.
Jennifer, I also want to touch back with something that you mentioned earlier about when we don't have enough staff and how do we train all levels of staff in serving teens. One of the things that we do at Oakland Public Libraries, we only have 6 teen services committee members right now, so 6 to share for across a system of 17 locations. And we've instituted pop-up teen zones. We started that about maybe 4 or 5 months ago, where a teen librarian will go to a branch once a month and we'll do a program, work on the collection. And they do a lot of these programs out on the floor, so staff that may not have interacted with teens previously, they really get to see our experts in action, knowing the teens, talking to them, doing reader's advisory, doing a program, so that behavior is really modeled, and our care for teens and is also really modeled as well across the system.
I want to jump in, everybody. We've got some really good audience questions that I want to bring in here. And what I'm going to do, this is actually kind of a question that's been asked a few different ways a bunch of times, so I'll try to just mold it into one question. But a lot of people are asking the question, if you're starting either a new youth or teen program or space, or both, particularly we had one person who said, we don't have a teen program, but we're building a new library and we're going to start a teen program. Basically, the question is, if you were completely starting from scratch, what would you do? What would be the first few things that you did? Which I think is that maybe that should have been a question on our list in the first place, because it's a really good question. So I'll turn it back to you, Jen, to moderate the discussion.
There's a really wonderful handbook that just came out. That's the first thing I would do is buy that. You know, I think that if I could just try and tackle this, you know, Amanda talked about sort of looking at how your populations, whether they're children or teens, use the resources, and I think really sort of taking the lead from users is really important. Mm-hmm. And you know, one thing that I tell branch librarians who are working with teens, you know, in our system and really all over the country is to sort of, in particular when you're doing a new program, if that's a weekly program or a monthly program or whatever, is to be patient and let things sort of build. That you're not going to right out of the gate have things be the way you want them to be. And I think that to sort of speak to the expectations that administration or managers may have related to the way the programs and activities that happen for teens take place in the library, that it's very different than when you put a story time on the schedule. You put the story time on the schedule and people know what that is, and that built-in constituency of parents who are looking for story time because it's such a traditional facet of what the library does, sort of does that work for you. And that teen programming is a completely different animal in that way. And this is a really nice segue, I think, into teen involvement. But I would really want to throw that question out to the panel as well. Anybody? Any takers?
I would say my first reaction was to find teens and start talking to them if you're starting from scratch, whether that be those that are coming in the branch, be it an online survey for your library, be it a paper survey, any way that you can get that teen input and feedback in designing that space and service is going to be invaluable. And you'll have that investment from the get-go that teens want to be there because it's their space. We do that whenever possible in all of our remodels. We've done that with our Youth Leadership Council. They've been a group that's been active with us for over 12 years, and they really take ownership of the library once that's done.
Yeah, and I think that it's often a daunting task to think about creating a Youth Advisory Council or a Teen Advisory Board from whole cloth just for one big project. So if you find that idea intimidating, trying to come up with a focus group, or seeing if you could partner with a local school and have 10 minutes of lunchtime, set up a table. So you're out there, you're trying to put yourself where the teens are, or draw them in with the promise of a Barnes & Noble gift card and free pizza in the case of a focus group, where it's a low level commitment. You're not asking them to see you through the whole process. You just want to know what their feedback is, and maybe they'll be your users. Maybe they're going to turn into your teen advisory group, and maybe they just shared some really great ideas with you that you can then build on. I also would encourage people to, if you're starting these programs from scratch, don't wait until you have the perfect program, because it will never happen. They're a moving target, and you have to be fast. You have to move with them. And it's okay if you try something and it didn't work, because you're going to do something different the next time, and you're going to build on that and improve that. But yeah, I think the listening is key.
If you're starting from scratch, community partners can be such an amazing resource. They already have a captive audience, a built community, and you can leverage that, tap in. Maybe that group comes to visit your library, you bounce some questions off their teens, or you collaborate on a program with them, and boom, you already have the audience built in.
Heather, I'm
Amy,
so
would
glad
you like to add?
about programs. Yeah, I'm so glad Heather mentioned programs that fail also, because I get that question a lot at workshops. I had a program bomb, and I always say, do you mean this week? Because the teen programs, I don't think I've ever had one. I've never had one that's gone the way it's supposed to. So I like the ideas from this group about the community groups, about going out to the schools. I'd also say that there has to be members of your staff that have teenagers. And a lot of times they have siblings that are close. That you're a great group to start with. Now, when we did our remodel a couple of years ago, our architects actually met with the teens, and we just let them brainstorm anything, even if it was crazy. I had one kid who wanted a roller coaster, the roof of the library, crazy ideas. Sometimes smaller, great ideas come out of that. So it just, you have to be willing to let them be themselves. And the architects, it was an eye-opener for them to hear it also.
Wonderful, wonderful. One of the things that I know comes up quite often is the request for us to sort of articulate the difference between serving teens and serving kids. That how are they? How is that different? And how is that similar? Anyone want to tackle that? I'm gonna pick on Amanda.
I do both as a youth services librarian. I'm 0 to 18 and everything in between. And it's very different. Kids you really are selling the parents. You really are selling the drivers. You know, kids coming to the library, a few can walk, a few are going to get here on their bikes, but to really get them involved, I'm selling to them and their parents at the same time. Teens would really rather their parents not come to the library with them, if at all possible.
Yeah.
So, you know, serving teens is a whole different, they're more a partner. Whereas I'm putting on a show for the kids, I'm putting on a show with the teens. You know, if they're not bought in, it's just not going to go well.
I think what Amanda said was exactly right, in terms of, and what Amy said as well. Like it's so hard sometimes, and you can't be afraid of failure. You just have to keep trying and trying and trying, and something will stick. You know, just in terms of even just trying to address teens in general, like there's such a difference in independence level. You know, some are very sophisticated, some are not. Even within our small age group, so sometimes even planning like the best program, you're going to get a 12-year-old that hates it and a 17-year-old that loves it. So it's always really difficult. And story times are a valued resource in the library, and you do get those parents that that will come to story times, but it's not the same with teens.
Anyone else like to tackle that?
I think that when you're dealing with teens, I'm part of the adult services department. Teen services are under that umbrella. I know some places they're under the youth services umbrella, but the more I do it, the more I'm starting to kind of feel like teens want to be seen as adults, but the reality is that the way we treat them in terms of how we program and how we handle our collections is more like the youth services department, and so we're kind of straddling that divide between, they want to come to the adult services desk. They don't so much want to, take part in those beautiful, brightly colored, primary colored spaces. But they still want the fun, and they want the high-level engagement programs that we use when we're working with younger people. So it's kind of touchy. And that's just describing one kind of teen, too. That's the other thing. I think between 12 and 18, there's this huge developmental piece that happens that, we really are serving children and adults and everything in between.
Someone in the audience asked, or actually a few people in the audience asked a really good question that's sort of along those lines. And, people have talked about the idea of isolating teens and isolating teen services in the library, where on the one hand you want to create a space that's kind of just for teens. I guess this could go for little kids too. You want to create a space for them, and you want a place where that they can call their own, that's not part of the rest of the library. But at the same time, how do you do that while still integrating them into the broader library community? And someone made a really good point, with YA books, there are a lot of adults who like YA books, and if you put them all in the teen space and sort of separate them, how can the adults get to them? Which I think is a really valid point. So anyway, I'm going to just turn that back over to you, Jennifer, and let you guys go.
I think that I've spent so much time early in my career campaigning for a teens-only space. So we've got signs up downstairs that say for 13 to 18-year-olds only. That doesn't mean grown-ups can't come in and use the collection. That means that they can't hang out there. And I think that that's fairly typical of teen spaces. And I think that what we're dealing with is something that's even if you create a teen space, there's adults will want to come and colonize it because it may look really choice to them, and adults may not understand why it's not for them. And on the other side, children may want to go in and sort of, there's an imperialization of that, with adults, parents taking their children in. So I think it's really important developmentally to have a space that's just for teens. I think that there are practicalities about the collection that can be easily addressed, but I really feel that for us in teen services, I know my staff even says, "Oh my God, those kids were so 13." Speaking to that difference in the age range, and that again, I think it's important to have that slice of space whenever possible for that age group, and I'll throw it out there for the panel.
I think regarding the collection, and yes, young adult literature is becoming very popular with adults. I don't think we should have any qualms about adding or suggesting to the adult collection development folks that if they know that adults want to read The Fault in Our Stars, add it to the adult collection. I like the idea of teen spaces being spaces for the things that teens want, and adult spaces are things the adults want. And if they want the same thing, if we're buying 30 copies of the latest James Patterson, I don't know why we can't add a couple more John Green over to the adult collection. And I know that that's speaking, if you have enough of a budget to have more than one copy of a book. But I do think that we need to make an effort to give people the books that they want, regardless of what the publisher designations are. So I think that's one way of addressing the collection end of things.
And speaking, our libraries have a pretty open floor plan. There is no teen room in the library I'm working in right now. There's the teen section between adult nonfiction and adult periodicals, but it's a totally open space. So we wind up reserving the tables, but we can't reserve the air. It's just the teens. It's just practically speaking. But part of what we've done at Sacramento, we have a Lucky Day collection. So The Fault in Our Stars, The Hunger Games, The Fangirl, not so much Hunger Games anymore, but you know what I mean. Those really hot teen titles, they're actually front and center in the library. They're not in the teen section, or maybe there's a copy in the teen section, but we have our Express or Lucky Day copy sitting right in front of the circulation desk. So those books that maybe our adult patrons have heard of and they want to try to give a chance to are actually out in adult space. They're not tucked away with the teen computers and the teen games.
Wonderful. When we're talking about space being reserved just for 13 to 18-year-olds or particular populations, I just want to throw this out there. When it comes to programming and attendance at programming, one of the things that we also do here is make sure that teen programs are for teens. So, making sure that just that slice of the population is in attendance, and that's 13 to 18-year-olds. And I'm wondering if you all do that same sort of thing, and if you do, to what success? And do you get pushback from grown-ups, or because grown-ups want to attend programs that are intended for teens, or do you get pushback from children or the parents of children? And by children, I mean 12 and under. I'm verging on something here.
We do.
I do have that.
Okay. Go ahead, Heather.
Oh, I have had that. Adults want to come to teen craft programs, and parents want their younger children to come to the teen, more technology-oriented programs. Is the trend that I see. And I think that that's wonderful. It demonstrates that there is a demand and a need for these programs that adult services staff and children's services staff can then provide. So I think that you can take that as a positive. You're doing demographic test, focus group testing, whatever. You provided program opportunities and ideas to those other age group programmers. But I agree with you that teen spaces should be reserved for teens. Just like we talk about, they should have their own space in the library. They should have their own space in programs. And I think part of it is just it's a peer group issue. It's not really about what they're capable of doing. I often have parents of younger kids say, oh, he's very skilled at this. I'm sure he'll do just fine. And it's not really about the skill level. It's about the social bit, which I think is important.
I couldn't agree more. It's not about what is happening at the program. It's about who is attending it. And certainly, a crochet craft, I would love to do that myself. But, it's not something that's intended for grown-ups. I'm really so glad that you used that word social. It's about what's going on, not necessarily the activity. And Lana, did you want to add something?
I did. We just had a series of programs with a local collective here, and we did sew your own tote bags where they actually brought sewing machines into the library for teens, and manga drawing, and create your own stamp. And there was a lot of adult interest in wanting to come to those programs, but our programs are 12 to 18. Our libraries also, like Amanda was describing, we have small branch locations, so we have a huge tween group that wants to join all the teen programs, and sometimes that's allowed, sometimes that's not. But then we get into the problem of, if there's a lot of tweens coming to our teen programs, our older teens don't want to come. So how do you balance that? And
Lana, oh my God, yes, sorry.
Some of our branches, we when we see, and as like with every teen program, this changes all the time because of who's coming into your library. But we try to separate out, like, video games for tweens from 3 to 4, but video games for teens from 5 to 6 or something, so that those audiences are kept a little bit more separate, and that the older teens feel comfortable with their peer group.
I'm just so excited to hear you say that. I really think that is an experience that many librarians are having around the country. And it's part of, and this is just my humble opinion, I really think it's part of that notion that the way children get taken to the library versus the way teens take themselves. I think that 10 to 12-year-old demographic is still in that age range where they're being taken to the library. So, and I'm just going to say this, it is easier to get them to go to a program in the same way that children go to a program because their parents take them to a program. And if you have 17 and 16-year-old young men and young women who want to go to a program and they show up and there's 12 and 11-year-olds there, it's going to be such a turnoff. And I just think it's just so vital for us to understand that we, even if our goal is to get attendance numbers, doing that on the backs of that younger demographic is really such a disservice to the older teens that we're also tasked to serve. So I just can't applaud you enough, Lana. I'm going to send you a box of chocolates. You're so awesome. Anyone else on that topic of whatever that topic was? Children versus yes.
Jennifer, one thing we've had success with recently is programs for people in their 20s and 30s. There are 2 librarians that do those. They call them the Next Gen programs. Actually, one of them used to be one of my teens in the Teen Advisory Board. Now she's a teen librarian, and we don't do that math, but she runs the 20 to 30s programs. So, if there's a program that adults want to be at, then it's just like the book copies. Why can't you just offer another section? So we've got 3D printing for teens, and we had a whole lot of adults interested. So then we just on a Saturday morning had one for adults. It's more cost effective to use your programmers for 2 programs or this, and then you don't have to start over with another one.
Wonderful and very, very practical. And we love practical. When we started talking today, when we talked about barriers, one of the things that you all brought up, I think almost all of you, started talking about flexibility and balance, that notion of flexibility. And I'm wondering, as you're talking about, in particular, I'm thinking of the pop-up teen spaces, having that sort of flexibility to serve large segments of this teen population with really little resources, I think is going to be important for all of us, really, as we see our budgets become what our budgets are becoming. And can you speak to a little bit about flexibility in staffing or flexibility in, like you're saying, the provision of programming for children or teens? Anyone want to take on the topic of being flexible? Or not?
I would say sort of what I mentioned before. Just sharing of resources. I feel, I think in a lot of libraries it's really rare to have only teen dedicated librarians, and I feel so lucky to work with the 6 that I have, and they are an incredible group. But they do a lot of stuff for the teen services in our community. Balancing, 2 or 3 or 4 branch collections, doing programs at multiple collections. It's a lot, and they're a great group, but sometimes it's hard. It's taxing on them. So how far can you stretch? And when does that budget advocacy come into play where you can get more teen librarians or more youth librarians in general?
Very good. Anyone else like to comment on that?
Yeah, certainly at Sacramento Public Library, we have more teen librarians now than we did recently, but that's up to 6 instead of 4, something like that, amongst our 28 branches. We are mostly a system of youth services librarians, so it really takes being flexible. Something that works for me is youth services is everyone's business, letting other staff members carry some of the programming for me, help me out with especially running a Yu-Gi-Oh tournament. We had a staff member here at my library who played Yu-Gi-Oh. I have never played Yu-Gi-Oh. So he brought in his friends as guest experts. They ran the whole thing for me, and kids loved it, and I just provided prizes, and that was wonderful. So leveraging your staff, their particular interests and talents, to run those programs, and your community partners. Being willing to fail with a community partner is huge. Being willing to let them come in and try to run a program and maybe only get 2 teams is huge, because sometimes they get 20 teens and it's awesome, and you have a partner for the next 3 years who puts on amazing programs with you.
Amanda, actually, we got someone in the chat space who asked a really good question that's relevant to what you just said about staff buy-in and community buy-in. A few people asked this. Some people said we have some youth services and some teen services librarians who said people in the library, sometimes patrons, sometimes other staff members, complain constantly about the noise and the rowdiness, even when it's not a policy violation, when it's just kids being kids. So the question was, and Jen, I'll turn this over to you, how do you deal with that, whether it's getting other staff to buy in or getting patrons to buy in, when people just aren't happy about having teens or having little kids running around in the library?
Yeah. I'm really on the verge of a rant here about that. And I think that this speaks again to that notion of teamwork. And I think, and Amy's distribution of chocolates, that if everyone understands that what is going on related to teen programming and teen services, and teens as valid, vital members of the community that use the library, if everyone is on board with that, and that certainly comes from location managers or system managers sending that message, then there should never be a situation where staff is complaining about the success of a program because there are so many people there who are interacting in such a positive, boisterous way. But I really think that comes from getting administrative managerial buy-in for that. And I think that it's important for us to be able to articulate to our users who are not teens or children that when you come to the library, you don't always get to use the library the way you want to use it every time. And if you are showing up after story time, chances are the place is going to be filled with preschoolers. And if that's a problem, maybe you schedule your visit differently. I have to figure out a nice way to say that, though. Or, if it's teen time at 5 p.m. on a Thursday, yeah, there's probably going to be teens here. But how do you say that? Hopefully your location manager knows a way to say that in a nice way. I'll throw that out there for you ladies.
I know how to say it. You're giving them the inside scoop. You're giving them the insider tip. Storytime is always going to happen on Thursdays, so maybe you want to come on Wednesdays. That's a quiet day. And we have our study rooms. You can go use those, and those are just for quiet study for you. So you can use the study rooms while we have community being built out here in the main library space. And community building is noisy.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that comes more from patrons than from staff, and I agree completely with what Amanda said, that it is giving them the inside scoop. Yeah, if you wanted to type up your resume, 3:30 on a school day is going to be really busy, but the computers are usually open before 2 or after 7, and then offering them the Chromebook that they can take into the silent reading room and work there. But yeah, it is. I think it's important to listen to people when they are complaining about things like that, because clearly if they're complaining to you about it, they're bothered by it, and they deserve to be listened to. But that just because you're listening to them doesn't mean that you need to change the way your library is structured or the way that you're treating people. I try to have just a general universal gauge. If I'm sitting at the desk and I can hear you at the table, you're talking too loud, and I'm going to go talk to you about that. And it doesn't matter if you're talking too loud on your cell phone negotiating a business contract on the computers, or if you're talking too loud and you're in the teen space gossiping about what happened at school. It's the universal rule. I know somebody mentioned that earlier, just being very consistent with the rules. And pointing out to patrons who are complaining about, boisterous teenagers, that they're not in a silent space; they're in a working space, and that we do provide silent spaces for them elsewhere. And I like, Jennifer, I liked your point about you don't always get to use the library exactly the way you want to all the time. So I think that's a good thing to remember as well.
And I would also like to say, this kind of started off our conversation. What are libraries of today? They are very different from they were in the past. So let's welcome those children and teens into our library. And like Amanda said, if it's either usually a patron that's complaining about the noise, I will always turn it around and say, 70 teens are using our library in the after-school hours. Isn't that a great thing? They have a place to go. They love our library. They love what we provide them. That's a great thing. And we'll listen. Like Heather said, we'll listen if there's an issue, and maybe it's not enough staff allocated to handling the 70 teenagers, and that's something we have to pay attention to and support the teens and our staff in that as well. But that many teenagers coming in for a program or an activity, that means we're doing something right.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that, sort of taking that notion of doing something right and looking at those attendance numbers, and how that wonderful attendance really reflects well not just on the efforts of teen services, but really on the library system as a whole. And I think one of the challenges that we face is sort of communicating that to our administration or our managers, so that they get to benefit from that shine of the awesomeness that's happening in children or teen services as well. Because if we're doing something right, then by default they're doing something right. Do you have any tips, any of you, for how to sort of communicate with administration to get them to understand the importance or benefit of what's going on in teen or children's services?
Jennifer, one of the best things we've done to communicate with the administration and board is have some teens sit on the adult board. Before we did that, there's a whole process where they interview, and I know Heather has a student trustee also, where they have a voice at the table right along with the adult board. So if they get to hear about noise complaints, then the teens are able to say, yes, but this was such a great program. And we find that the administration sometimes wants to hear from them more easily than the staff, which makes a certain amount of sense. We want the teens' input on that, just as we like to see parents sitting on the board of people who are regular library users. And before we did that, if you have an administration or a board who's maybe not interested in having a person that regularly, get representatives from your teen advisory board to appear at the board sometimes, or invite the board and administration to come to a teen board meeting and share the pizzas and an idea sharing. So just get everybody together, and that makes a big difference.
Yeah, I would agree with Amy, and having a teen on the board has been a wonderful thing, and I would encourage everybody to consider doing that. Our teen is not a voting member of the board, she's a liaison, but it's been a great opportunity, and I think that's one of the ways that we can advocate for ourselves. I think as a teen services librarian and children's services too, I'm sure you really do have to be your own advocate, because when the board gets together and meets, they may not have your concerns at the forefront. I think, typical board concerns are, they're kind of up here and we're down here in the trenches working. And you need to be sure that your statistics are always reported in the monthly reports to the director, to the board. Be sure that the stories are getting out. Be sure that if there's a local newspaper that does a rotating community voice piece, be sure that you have a turn in that, in voice, getting a little write-up about what the great programs are that you're doing. If you have a local press, invite them to your programs, especially the ones where there are good pictures. Like somebody came when I did an Angry Birds live tournament. We had boxes and balls that were being thrown, and it made for great visuals. And so the local photographer was happy to come and have pictures of teenagers doing something fun and interesting at the library. But I really, don't be shy about putting your programs in front of people that are the decision makers and putting your statistics there, because they need to see what we're doing, because, like we said before, they can't come to the programs. So they need to see, and if they don't have their own teenagers, they need to see the results of our work.
I think what you're saying is absolutely golden. I really do. And I couldn't agree more with that sort of notion of telling our own story, making sure that even if the statistical report at the organization doesn't separate teen programming from the rest of youth programming, but keeping those numbers separate. So if the occasion arises, or if there's just the opportunity to talk about the impact that teen services is having, you've got those numbers readily available for yourselves. And also the notion of narrative. If there's not a monthly report that needs to be submitted somewhere, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do one and submit one, even if you're not asked to. It's so important to let the people inside the organization and outside of the organization know what's going on in teen services. And I think, you harnessing the power of the press, and I saw those pictures of the Angry Bird thing all the way here in Texas, and it was wonderful, and it was so captivating to see that you're doing your own press. And I think that if our directors or our managers aren't, if they should be getting the positive teen services message from us, but if they hear it from someone in the community, that is even more valuable. If they're hearing how wonderful story time is, if they're hearing how wonderful the early literacy program is, or the teen programming or the teen advisory group is, if they're hearing that, if they're seeing that in the press, that is, a prophet cannot be a prophet in his own hometown. That's a way to get someone to really help us do that advocacy work for us. Anything else on that? I don't want to move away from that topic too soon.
I do want to say, and it's not only about us telling their story, but the youth really sharing their own story and being advocates in your systems and in your locations to get youth out there as much as possible. Oakland Public Library does a great job of that in putting youth in front of City Council whenever we need to advocate for the library. They tell their own story about why the library is important to them, why we should give the library more funds, we do invite elected officials to our events. It makes a huge statement when the mayor can come to your event and say, I support this program. I support the work that you're doing in the community. Statistics are really important too. A statistic like last year we had over 13,000 volunteer hours in our libraries. A statistic like that can't go away when you say, look at all the hours that teens are giving to services in our library. One last thing I want to say about that is, in terms of putting youth in front, is also, if we have volunteers or interns, introduce them to the staff and the players in your library. Show them how competent teens can be, how much they bring to the organization, and they can see how we work as an organization, how we serve the public as well.
Wonderful. We talked a little bit about the idea of teens as a problem population and how to sort of handle that perception. And we talked about being sure to involve teens in the development and implementation of services and programming for themselves and their peers. And I'm wondering if there's any gold under anyone's pillow about collaborating with kids and teens in the development of really the future of library services for kids and teens. or not.
I heard a great quote recently, and it was related back to listening to our patrons and listening to what people, and it's a Henry Ford quote where he said, if I'd asked people what they want, they would have said faster horses. And of course, but you have to really listen to what the people were saying, and Henry Ford, as we all know, realized that people didn't really want faster horses. They wanted to get where they were going more quickly. And so I think that if we listen to what teens are saying to us, but then listen to the subtext of what it is that they need from what they think that they want. Not that we're second guessing our teens, but when they say they want to do another Minecraft program, do they really want another Minecraft program? Or are they really excited to be engaging with the library regarding the technology and the internet spaces that they're occupying? And so listening to them and responding to them, and then using what we know professionally and what we know about what other libraries are doing, and trying to broaden that into a service that we can really build for the future.
Adding that libraryness, that library value to it. And I really appreciate that quote, because I find that when I'm talking to teens, if you ask them the type of programming they want, they're going to sort of couch their response in what they think you want to hear. So I love it when they say, well, we want to do a book group. And I think, no, you don't want to do a book group. We're talking to a librarian, so yeah, you want to do a book group.
Yeah.
And I think that that brings us, to the idea of the difference between advocacy and leadership. And if I could just talk about that for just a second. We're so used to using that standard term, teen advisory group or teen advisory board or whatever, that word advisory. And advisory to me sounds a little passive. And I hear so many librarians say that, I asked my advisory board, what kind of programs did they want me to do for them? And there were, of course, our ideas, and then the follow-up is, and I did those programs and no one showed up for them. Taking the advisory out and putting leadership in, leadership means that you guys are going to do the programs, and if no one turns up, well, at least you're there and we still had a program. And I really like that. It really is taking the librarian out of the process, so we're not beating our heads against the wall trying to figure out what is it that teens want when it comes to library programming. You're really putting it in the hands of teens. And I know that Oakland has done just some remarkable things related to teen leadership in the library. In the development and implementation of programming and services, and also in the realm of advocacy. Lana, would you mind talking just a little bit about, I'm really fascinated by the notion of teens going and advocating for services and really having that extreme hands-on when it comes to development and implementation of programming. Could you speak to that for a moment?
Sure. I mean, that kind of, it's sort of the foundation of our entire department, having youth at that center in developing and forwarding our services. It started with our Youth Leadership Council, like I said, more than 12 years ago, and it's always a group of ranging from 8 to 12 teens that we really, developing that leadership takes a lot of work, a lot of time, support on behalf of the librarians working with them, but that's our mission for them. They lead. We give them the information. We connect them with. We have a library advisory commission that's working on advocacy for us. So we connect them with the information and guide them to do things like city council presentations. But they write their speech and they present. We just support them in that. The Youth Leadership Council has been actively involved in most of our remodels in our library system. We give them that power. We connect them with architects. I hope everyone can hear me. There were some sirens. We connect them with our architects and in the building process. And beyond the Youth Leadership Council, we also have neighborhood teen advisory boards as well that our teen librarians, that some of whom have been here over a decade, have really sort of given them that support and always that consistent message that this is their group. We are here to help them, give them the information, but if they lead, we will support them. And then we do that in every single thing that we do.
Wonderful.
Can I add that Amy has a section in the whole library handbook for teen services all about teen involvement and listening to your teens and finding ways to give them leadership opportunities. And it's a really wonderful section that she wrote. So.
Yeah,
thanks, Heather.
Jen, I heard you saying what I was about to say, which is that we're just about at the end of our time. So I'll leave it to you to ask everyone for final thoughts and closing thoughts and that kind of thing. We got about 3 minutes.
All right, friends, we've got about 3 minutes. So if you wouldn't mind, any last bits of wisdom you'd like to impart before we say good afternoon? Lana, can we start with you?
Sure. I would say keep trying. Those of you that are working with teens, thanks for your dedication to them. Thanks for your support and advocacy of them. I'm really happy that we had this hangout today. I think it's a great step in continuing to promote teen services and the important work that we do.
Thank you. Heather?
I think it's important to be reminded that you're not doing this alone, even though you might be the only person at your building. Dan could probably tell you how many people are registered or how many people are watching here, but there's a whole community of teen and children's services librarians out there just waiting for you to tap into them. So seek out blogs with voices that you can connect with. Use Twitter to find your personal learning network. And look to your neighbors, look to the people, librarians in the next town over, or people that you might have known in library school that are now also teen or children's services librarians. And I think that if you can find a professional community that resonates with you, you're going to feel really buoyed up and well supported in the good work that you're doing.
Thank you. And Amy?
I wanted to thank everybody for coming. If you're attending this webinar, obviously you've mastered a lot of technology, which is going to help you with teen services coming up. And also you have an interest in continuing to follow trends and to find new ways to engage your patrons. And my guess is that most of your libraries, you're already doing a really good job, probably all of your libraries. You never know, and even if you're only finding 1 or 2 teens to connect with at the moment, you never know if that one will come back and be a librarian at your facility. So good job.
Thank you. And Amanda.
Yeah. I would say be encouraged, especially if you're maybe like me, wearing all of the hats, not just the teen one. You know, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to take chances. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to ask for help from your learning community or from the community group next door who maybe could come in and put on a really great program for you. So don't be afraid to fail, but I know you won't. You're all going to be fabulous.
Friends, thank you so much. Thank you, Ailey, and thank you, Dan.
Yeah,
Just awesome.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you to all of our wonderful panelists and to our fantastic audience, and of course to the library staff at Northwestern University for all their help. We hope we see you at next month's episode, and we hope that everybody has a great day. Bye, everyone.